Good morning, children. Welcome back. So today, what we're starting with is we're starting with the second chapter of civics. We're starting with diversity and discrimination. So this is in continuation with what you studied in your previous chapter. In your previous chapter, students, just a small recap. You studied about diversity, right? We studied about how diversity impacts us, right? Um, how diversity influences, what caused diversity, and what is diversity. The uniqueness, the fact that people are different from each other is diversity, right? Now, this is in continuation with that chapter, and we will be focusing on discrimination in this chapter, right? So let's begin. So now, students, diversity is both a strength as well as a weakness, right? Diversity is both a strength and a weakness. Now, in this chapter, we will be focusing on that how can diversity be a weakness, right? And what should we do to avoid that situation, right? So now, so we have three concepts that we will be focusing on for this part of the chapter: prejudice, stereotypes, and discrimination, right? Now, what is prejudice? Now, bache, diversity leads to prejudice, right? Now, what is prejudice? Prejudice is when we form negative attitudes and negative opinions about people, right? When we, without even understanding that where they're coming from, why they are the way they are. So, this is known as prejudice. What is prejudice? The negative attitudes and opinions that we form about other people, right? Now, why do we form, and what kind of negative attitudes am I talking about? So, for example, now, say, for example, there is someone who comes from a particular part of the country and does not speak the same language as, say, for example, maybe I do, right? So, because they do not speak the same kind of language, maybe they cannot talk in English, for example. So, I form a negative attitude about them in my head, right? In my head, I'm forming a negative attitude about them that, oh, they don't even know English. Like, yes. So this is a very negative attitude and a very negative opinion that I am forming in my mind, right? And what does this happen? What, and if I make this kind of an attitude in, if I have this kind of an attitude in my mind, what happens? I'm boosting my self-esteem that, oh, I can talk in English, but someone else cannot talk in English, right? So I'm boosting my self-esteem, but that shows that I am very narrow-minded. Yes, and I'm intolerant of people around me. That can I not converse to people who cannot speak in English? Yes. And why is it that I do not like people who cannot speak in English? Right. So when people form, this is just one example, students, about anything, right? When anyone forms negative attitude and an opinion about people without understanding that why they are different from us, why can someone not talk in English, and also why should everyone talk in English? Is talking in English that important, right? So prejudice is when people form negative attitudes and opinions about others without understanding why they are different from us, right? It is used to boost an individual's self-esteem. The one who practices prejudice, right, they are doing it to boost their self-esteem, that, oh, I am better off, I am good in my brain, I am better off than the other person, right? And it is completely unreasonable. It is unreasonable, and people who practice prejudice are narrow-minded and intolerant, right? So this is about prejudice. Once again, prejudice is when you form negative attitudes and opinions about people without understanding why they are different from us, right? Now prejudice, bache, when I think that, oh, I'm superior, right? This leads to discrimination. Yes. Now, what I mean by discrimination is that when people are treated differently on the grounds of nationality, age, caste, disability, gender, income, color, or religion. right? Now, prejudice, bache, as you recall, if you recall, prejudice is caused by diversity and inequality. That everyone is not the same, right? And they are all, everyone is unequal. So, someone is judged as inferior, that someone is inferior to the other person. Now, what happens is when these people, when the people who are inferior, they are treated as differently. When people are treated differently on the grounds of nationality, age, caste, disability, gender, and so on, is known as discrimination. Now, for example, students, we were studying about caste system in our previous classes, if you recall, right? We were studying about caste system, right? Wherein we were talking about how certain groups of people are not allowed and um, they are discriminated against, right? So when I say discriminated against, what do I mean? Discrimination means bhedbhav, right? So in our ancient Indian society, the people who belong to the lowest caste, right, the Shudras or the untouchables, they were not allowed to get into temples. They were not allowed to pray in the temples. They were not allowed to go to schools. Yes. This means that they were treated differently. They were not treated as people of the higher caste. Yes. So are not, when people are treated differently on the grounds of nationality, that for example, if we have someone who's not an Indian, right, and oh, sorry, you can't do this, this is only for Indians. Why? Excuse me, right? So, or maybe so uh, you have income, right? Oh, if you're not rich, if you do not earn more than a particular amount, sorry, you cannot go to this particular hotel, right? So these are students' examples of discrimination when people are treated differently on the grounds of nationality, age, caste, disability, gender, right? This is basically when prejudice, when the fact that, oh, some people are superior than others is acted upon. When prejudice is acted upon, it leads to discrimination wherein people are treated differently, right? In prejudice, you have opinions. In discrimination, you treat people differently. That is the difference, right? Next, what we have is students stereotypes. Now, prejudice is when you have opinions, negative opinions upon someone without understanding them. Discrimination is when you act upon those negative opinions, right, and you treat them differently. Now, stereotypes is, now students, when a bunch of traits are associated with all members of a specific social group, can be negative or positive both. Now, when I say this, I want to explain this first. Now, stereotypes is groups. When you look at social groups, can be anything on the basis of religion, on the basis of caste, on the basis of gender, right? Now, for example, when I say that girls are criers, or all boys are so athletic, or if I say that Delhi people are bad at driving, right? So, are all people in Delhi bad drivers? Are all the girls criers? Are all boys very athletic? No, they're not. Right? And what did I do? I fit a very, very big group into one sentence. It can be negative, positive, anything. But the fact that it's a bunch of traits associated with members of a particular group. Now, what have I done? I have ignored uniqueness, right? There are girls in our class who are highly athletic, girls all across. Some of them are highly, highly athletic, right? The boys cry too. And you have bad drivers all over the world and good drivers too, right? So, what have I done? I've misinterpreted the reality. So when you associate a bunch of traits with all the members of a specific social group, that, oh, this group is like this, oh, this group is like this. People of West Bengal are very intelligent, right? So what have I done? I have associated a specific trait to all the members of the group, right? So what have I done? This is misinterpretation of reality. This is not the reality. And I have ignored individuals, how unique they are, right? So this is stereotypes. And for this tutorial, these three things I want to cover, just a small recap of what we've covered. We've covered prejudice, discrimination, and stereotypes. Prejudice is when we form negative attitudes and opinions about people, right? When we act upon the prejudice, it leads to discrimination, wherein we treat people differently, right? And stereotypes is when we associate when we associate a bunch of traits to a particular group, which can be negative or positive both, right? So this is stereotypes. With this, we cover half of the chapter, and I hope you understood the major concepts that we've covered in this chapter. Thank you so much.